Hotep, greetings, family and friend. This is Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Jr., also known as Nana Kwekujira Ajiman II of the Agogo Stool in Asante, Ghana. It is a great pleasure to be a part of this great awakening of African peoples and this explosion of knowledge which has revealed the enormous truth that African peoples represent. We have been working in the vineyards for many, many generations to bring this truth forth. Great men and women have given their lives to making sure that this is the reality that we are dealing with. And we have to thank those who have made this enormous contribution. We also have to thank those who inadvertently have contributed to the Great Awakening. They were folks who thought that they could diminish the truth and hide it. We have a problem which we are referring to as the miseducation of the Negroes or African peoples, but we also have a problem in terms of the falsification of history. And so that we have to be aware that right now there is an explosion of information revealing the truth. And one of the latest aspects of this explosion of information was a documentary of enormous significance called Africa's Great Civilizations. And it was produced and edited by Dr. Henry Louis Gates, often called Skip Gates, and it was sponsored by outstanding institutions, Bank of America, outstanding foundations like the Mellon Foundation, and personal foundations like the Ford Foundation and others. So we want to thank those who were able to bring this three-part international historical raising of the African truth. And we hope that this will continue. We know that many people have given their lives in studying this truth and dealing with the falsification that we have, unfortunately, in the larger culture and in the institutions of higher education. This revelation of the real truth of African peoples is important for the whole of the planet, because we're talking about the African origin of humankind millions of years ago, the African evolution of society, and the African cradle of civilization in the Nile Valley.
This is an interview with Dr. Leonard Jeffries for the Media Advocates and GreatBlackNewsNow.com. Dr. Jeffries, are you on the line?
I guess I am, Brother Aswad. I'm on the line and I'm trying to get myself ready.
Okay. Dr. J, you stay ready. You told me that you stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
That's true, but we specifically want to target some very important activities that are going on now and that have been going on historically, and we want to tie them together. So there's nobody better in the world to tie these things together than Len Jeffries, simply because he's lived them, he's studied them, he's participated in them, he can speak firsthand and secondhand in ways that other people have not been lucky enough to do it. So I've lived life to the fullest and as best it was presented to me. And so these issues that we're raising are so important that we need to focus on them. And one of the things that right now that we're in the middle of is a new level of consciousness is going to emerge from our people because of these global controversies that are now taking place. We can focus in on this process by looking at the role of athletes and actors in struggle. And when we've lost this great one, Dick Gregory, most recently, certainly he would be in that category of athletes and actors in struggle, standing on principle and not being used and exploited for the sake of somebody making money.
Well, he had that opportunity. And since we're on the subject of the Honorable Dick Gregory, I have a question for you. I know your relationship goes back many, many years, but did you know him when he made the transition from stand-up comic, doing extremely well in the entertainment industry, to civil rights advocate, to taking a stand on our situation during that period of time with Dr. King's movement and so forth?
Yes, I was very fortunate, along with my wife, to become part of the Dick Gregory saga.
Okay, I like that.
When we're talking about the Dick Gregory saga, we're not talking about an individual.
Okay, I like that.
We're talking about a spirit force. And when I read him and my wife reads him, he doesn't stand alone.
Okay.
Standing next to him in every way is his wife, Lillian. And everybody affectionately called her Lil.
Okay.
Even though he was out front and everybody saw him and all of the very real activities that he was involved in, he was standing on a rock. Okay. And he was leaning on this rock and using this rock as his base. And that was the wife unseen that was there with him for all of the trials and tribulations. And out of her sacred womb came 10 or more children. And so while Dick got heavily involved in the struggle, as one would be in the 60s and beyond, into the 70s, 80s, up until he left us, someone had to be there to take care of that responsibility of raising and instilling consciousness in the children. And so what he had was an unseen force with him all of the time, and that was his wife, Lil. She not only raised the children, she helped to manage the business. And so he didn't make any decisions without consulting her.
Question.
And so we need to see the Gregory phenomena and what did he come out of? What was his family? What was her family? And how did they come together to produce this special force? And with those children, it's difficult to raise children alone in the normal circumstance, but to raise children in the midst of struggle is an enormous responsibility. And they were able to do it because they had a special relationship as the warrior male and the mother, the queen mother, partner. And so we need to be able to see the struggle in that sense, because it applies not only to Dick and Lillian, it applies also to Paul Robeson and his queen. It applies also to Jackie Robinson and his queen. And so we need to be able to see these things in a larger dimension, not just as prominent individuals with a mission, but as people who understood the larger question of family and spirituality and consciousness. And so I think that we need to begin to understand these things in a deeper way. And so Dick's life needs to be studied, not in terms of his genius as a comedian who becomes a comedian activist with a special mission, but as someone who don't want us to see these athletes out there by themselves. They are standing on a rock of African familyness that is often left out of the picture.
Okay, Dr. J, question. We really want to focus on the Honorable Dick Gregory right now. And I have a couple of questions for you. One of them is, I know you go back, exactly how and where did you meet Brother Gregory? Was it when he was coming up, or had he made it already, or how old were you guys?
Well, the context that I was trying to outline was that we're in the middle of what I'm calling the African Renaissance, the rise of African peoples. And
Right now?
Yes.
Okay.
We can't understand it, we can't see it, because we don't have a historical perspective. So in order to have a historical perspective, you got to go back, and in order to have a historical perspective that's meaningful, you have to deal with what I'm calling systems analysis. So while we're dealing with the phenomena of Gregory, and we may deal with other phenomena, we need to see a larger picture. And the larger picture is that we're in a system of white supremacy and domination. We've been in it for 500 or so years in a systematic way as a result of enslavement. We're actually now in a great period of our awakening and pulling out of it. And so the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s was that great period in which we've made an enormous change. And I call it the Great Awakening. 1945 to 1995 is the period we'll look back upon 100, 500, 1,000 years from now and say that was the major period where black folks made the decision to move out of the domination of white supremacy and the mental control of white supremacy and the spiritual devastation of white supremacy, to move on to another process of returning to the source, their Africanness, and creating a new type of African consciousness for the future. So Dick Gregory fits right in the middle of this period of greatness. 1945 to 1995 is a 50-year turning point of history in favor of people of color. And so he was able to use his athletic prowess, his concern with health, he was able to use his genius to turn it into a process of liberation of the mind and the spirit that needs to be seen. And so the books that he wrote and the activities, the hundreds and hundreds of days out of the year that he moved around the world, meeting folks, no matter how humble they were, no matter how important they were, he made an enormous contribution to this period of what I'm calling the Great Awakening, when African peoples were able to put in place a system that's growing and expanding in terms of their economic ability to control their lives, in terms of the political ability to manage their lives, and in terms of the cultural ability to have their revered presence sacred part of their life. So I'm talking about economics, politics, and culture as key to understanding anybody, anything, any movement, any institution. And I want to put Dick Gregory right in the middle of this great awakening and his continued contribution to it. Even after his material body has left us, his spiritual presence will be a phenomena for...
till the end of time. Till the end of time.
Yes, so he joins the eternity of spirits that we are a part of. And that's the fantastic thing, to see Dick Gregory in his fullness. And so I met him at the height of the 50-year turning point of history.
And when was that, Dr. J?
I date 1945, when African peoples, coming out of the devastation of World War II, where 100 million people were killed or murdered because of white-on-white crime, of the struggle between capitalism and fascism, produced death and destruction in unbelievable dimensions. And that came out of a period of the collapse of the the economy in the 30s, and in the period before the 30s, you had the period of white-on-white crime called World War One. So World War One was when a system of white supremacy, which had existed on an exploitation of African peoples and peoples of color and stealing Native American land. You have hundreds of years that foundation, which is what people are referring to as America's greatness. But it really was America's super exploitation of peoples, including Native Americans and Africans. And in the 40s, with the collapse of their military and their political systems, African people began to make their serious move. And so out of that period, 1945 to 1995, came dozens of African nations, 60 or 70 or 80 new African nations on the African continent, in the Caribbean, in South and Central America. During that period of time, 1945 to 95, black people, African people began to look at how can we control the economics and the politics together.